What is going on, everyone? Badger here. Should have liked and sub, and let's get into this. We got a dense one. Leslye Headland, of course, former personal assistant to Harvey Weinstein and showrunner of The Acolyte. Oh, The Acolyte. She has come up with a pretty long and, like I said, extensive interview on Nerdist. She explains a lot of the things. Oh, I tell you what, the audience saw a completely different show, apparently. Let's just get into it. Let's just get into it because it is. And some of these are like, yeah, they mentioned Plagueis and magic. And I was wrong. I was right. If you have any knowledge of previous Star Wars before Disney, you keep that to Legends because they're on their own new path here, stunning and brave path. So first question they say is, at what point in the creative process for the Acolyte did a virgins become such an important part of the story? And that, of course, is just a fancy word for force nexus or a convergence of force energy, something that if you're force sensitive, you can tap into. At least that's how it used to work. God knows how it works now. And so they chose Brendok had to be a location for that force nexus or virgins for a couple of different reasons. One, for the motivation of the Jedi in terms of their mission and why they're on Brendok in the first place, even though instead of meditating and concentrating on finding that force virgins or nexus, they're taking water samples and using metal detectors. So there's that. And here's the big one. You're going to see this a lot is, yes, I know Star Wars Theory and I had our famous little nerd battle on Open Bar. He was right and I was wrong. Sacred texts are referring to Legend Star Wars, where the Force is the Force, of course, and magic was just another word for it. In Disney Star Wars, magic is, in fact, an entirely separate thing from the Force, and I have no idea how it works. I don't think they do either, so good work with that one. But as she continues here, we also felt that it very important that the witches had found that planet because their power alone would not match an outside threat. They need to have the augmentation or the amplification of a virgins or force nexus. We did not want the witches to just automatically be as powerful as Jedi. So now in Star Wars, Disney Star Wars canon, magic isn't as strong as the Force, okay? And so they had to use Force energy to complement their magic, which isn't the Force. Okay. The witches needed to feel like a nomadic community that had finally found their place that would not only give them shelter and protection, but also grant them more and more power and control over their ability. My backstory to the witches of Brendok and where they are is that Torben mentions it's an old mining company. So I sort of imagine that it's a little bit like John Carpenter's The Thing, right? There are all these miners there. They are drilling. They found something and then everybody was gone. And the next thing you know, 50 or 60, 100 years later, this coven moves in. A couple of years after that, the Jedi start to move there. It's almost like a magnet that's pulling these characters towards it. A lot of different narrative reasons to put it there as opposed to after the fact of, oh, also let's explore this cool aspect of the Star Wars vocabulary. Bitch, you said virgins because Qui-Gon says virgins, and you, as we find out later in this, you want to connect them as proto-chosen ones. Again, virgins can hide force-sensitive people. Is that the reason that the Coven chose that planet? I asked because I want to know what came first. They found the planet, they moved there, and then decided to create the girls, or they moved to Brendok specifically to create the girls? She says, that's a really good question. It's also a backwards question because we haven't confirmed that the witches created them. So they said they have, and they also say they haven't created them. Okay, so not confirmed. We just have the word of Mother Anastasia and our assumptions, I guess. And so Nerdist says, fair enough. She goes, but yes, obviously, yes, it's intimated very strongly that's what happened. I believe that the former is true for the Coven and the latter is true for Anastasia. I think Anastasia, not unlike Venestra, they are these very compelling leaders that have very intense senses of forethought. And Anastasia was always thought of as this religious figure that gained followers more and more as she moved out into the world. So for her, I thought she always sort of knew that she needed to settle somewhere in order to bring to fruition, not a grand scheme, but what the next step of her journey would have been, the height of her powers. And I think she also knew that at some point, in utilizing the extent of her powers, that her destruction would come pretty soon after that. Her powers of creating the chosen ones, essentially, that's a proto-chosen one or whatever, turning into a dark smoke monster. Fenestra is having a similar experience of something that will tip the scale. She's understanding they have this destiny. They believe that they have the destination spiritually. Fenestra is putting the pieces together for herself. This is it. This is what's coming. Not unlike Anastasia, what's coming is going to be the fulfillment of that. Jesus Christ, that's some word circle speak. And yeah, this would be the assumption that this is where Abeloth, if you pretend she knows who that is, would be down there in that pit. Virginses have played an important part in Star Wars since the original trilogy, even if not everyone is unfamiliar with the term, but there are different types. What can you tell us specifically about the nature of the virgins on Brendok? This was very important to me, Dave Filoni, and to Pablo Hidalgo. And yes, more blame goes on Pablo, even though Dave Filoni is the creative officer and he's the one greenlighting all this shit to begin with and letting it happen. That the girls are not a virgins. The girls themselves are not a virgins in the Force. They needed, again, however they got there, the act of creating them was going to need amplification. So again, the Force scissoring technique or whatever that Mother Anastasia performed on Coral to create them, they used the power of the Force nexus on the planet in that pit to amplify their own Force powers and magical powers, even though magic is different than the Force. Fuck, that ruins a lot of things to actually make that a thing. Anyway, they needed, again, however they got here, the act of creating them was going to need amplification. Therefore, we came around to the decision that the Virgins was on Brendok and that it would remain mysterious. So that way, if we went back there in future tellings of the story, we could uncover a little bit more about what was actually there. It was important that this type of virgins was a natural one as opposed to within a human being or an alien, because if the virgins had been within a human being, that would have really been on the nose. Okay, this is not even my question. It's Saul's. The twins, where did they come from? How were they created? Stay tuned next week. Tune in next week. Tune in next week. We definitely aren't going to leave you hanging. Okay, so we're going to find out definitively whether they were created using lesbian space magic and a combination of the Force. And apparently the equinox aligning, equinox, whatever. Painful. Do you know if you're getting season 2? No. So thank God we don't, even though you can probably assume they're going to. And she's already talked about the fact that she put everything in this first one. All right. Anastasia's ability to be in Torben's mind while physically existing in the real world was very reminiscent of Mother Talzin's powers, as was Anastasia's ability to change her corporeal form into shadows. Talked about your love and appreciation of the Night Sisters before. Were those powers directly inspired by Talzin? And so she says, absolutely. Talzin is a figure that looms really large in Star Wars for me. On the Clone Wars, obviously, I responded to them immediately because it was more Star Wars content. It was George Lucas Star Wars content. But I was blown away by the Night Sisters arc. Asajj's storyline, I was just like, hold on, this can't happen. This is Star Wars? Okay, blah, blah, blah. She liked them. I love the differentiation between their powers and the Jedi powers. It was all just really great. So in making this show, I knew one of the first things I wanted to take a look at was creating my own version of witches, because I think that the Night Sisters are a bit more mercenary than the Acolyte witches. I think basically wanted to stay out of everyone's way and aren't grasping for any sort of power. They're not getting involved in any kind of political skirmish or any war movement. They would be the last thing they would want to do. That would be the last thing they want to do. So very different, but still echoing and calling back to the influences that those characters had on me. In terms of the specific powers, though, and this is where they're saying, how are the Acolyte witches different from the Night Sisters? And here we go. I would still maintain in the old canon, again, that magic is just another name for the Force being used differently, but the Night Sisters utilize magic exclusively. With my witches, it's a bit of a hybrid. They're definitely dabbling in the Force and calling the Force by a different name. So that's the thread. They're trying to cultivate their sensitivity to it without having to be trained by the Jedi. Is that even possible? So see, that right there makes it seem like the magic is the Force. But I also think that in the ascension ceremony, you see how they're utilizing not just whatever the virgins may be physically on the planet, but the eclipse, these powerful movements of heavenly bodies and whatever's under the earth, that type of thing. What is meant to be expressed there is that they are drawing their power from nature, from magic, and from the Force. So we never sort of go, they're using magic the way that the Night Sisters are. They're using the Force, even though they're not Jedi. Are you fucking confused yet? Because I'm confused. To me, it felt more interesting to show a group of people, a group of witches having abilities that the Jedi could not pinpoint, that the Jedi weren't going, oh, well, that's magic. Oh, well, that's the Force, because magic is the Force. That's why when you make it a separate, actual separate thing, it really breaks writing. That's one of the reasons they get so thrown off by what they're seeing. It's so unpredictable, and it's difficult for them to categorize and then report back to the council. The Jedi are trying to get as much information as they can, but each time they interact with the witches, they're getting different impressions of what the Coven is doing. And then going into the episode, it suggests that the Jedi might have done something truly terrible. Yeah, they did nothing. This is where they try and cope away that the Jedi actually did do something wrong. Why does Saul feel a connection to Osha so immediately, and specifically, why does he feel like she's meant to be his Padawan? I wanted to keep some mystery around that. I wanted to definitely call back to Qui-Gon and Anakin. Qui-Gon almost immediately zeroes in on the potential that Anakin has, because he can feel the Force power, the specialness of Anakin, the exceptionalism of Anakin. I think that Saul feels the same way about Osha. There's just something that he feels with his connection with the Force, her strength in the Force, and that's how he recognizes it. Except because we find out they're twins and split and all that, and they share the same soul or whatever in two bodies, he would have felt the same thing from both of them. And they talk about Qui-Gon. I'm glad you brought up Qui-Gon, because I want to ask about Anakin. I think the connection between the connections between the twins and Anakin were obvious even before this episode, but I want to focus on their differences, specifically this idea that their one consciousness is split into two bodies. Why would that make them stronger, aka the power of two, and not weaker if they're two halves of one whole? Headland says, I think it's both. The girls are guinea pigs. They're patient zero for this sort of power. It didn't work perfectly. Therefore, the girls on their own can never be as powerful as Anakin on their own. Their full potential together has yet to be explored. They've been separated too long. I.e., if you read between the lines on that, together they could be stronger than Anakin. It's like when you're doing an experiment and it's the first round of it. They are maybe not the first round, but one of the first experiments of this particular use of the power. So the twins are weaker than Anakin for sure. They're going to fall short of what we will eventually become the chosen one. What will eventually become the chosen one. They will never achieve what that is, because in my mind, Anastasia could only do so much. She's not powerful enough to create one person. The twins split. Anastasia's power split, and therefore a lot of her philosophy is about the power of two, about the fact that they must stay together. They must stay together. The twins are stronger together if she keeps them together. And obviously there's an analogy to this of the isolationist feeling, not just of the Coven, but also of family. If I can keep you safe, then you won't get hurt. You won't get, okay, she repeats herself a lot. Why are the twins the Coven's future, and why would letting Osha go with the Jedi sacrifice? It's basically like the whole plan was for them to become the leaders and to do what Anastasia was doing and use their lesbian magic and the convergence in the pit and the aligning of the heavenly bodies to continue to make children. And if you can't, literally, if you can't procreate, indoctrinate. That's what that would have done. They would have just kept making their own endless supply of Force switches. Why did they all die when Indara freed Kelnaka? And I saw some people, including Alyssa Mercanti, trying to say that Kelnaka and separating of them from the Force witches using their magic on him didn't kill them, just passed out. Since that was a big question when we were working on the episode, to me, it was very important because it was two stories. One, that Indara, despite her being completely and utterly the consummate Jedi in this episode, I did feel it was important that she also misjudged something. If we were going to explore those themes, she couldn't just be the infallible Jedi. So she also had to have something else going on with her. And I think what she did is, in the moment, in trying to sever the connection between Kelnaka and the witches, she dealt with a power that she did not understand and was unfamiliar with. Did she kill them? Yes. She didn't know what was going to happen to them. So it wasn't intentional. No, she did not know. All she was thinking was, I have to save him. Again, it starts to become the selfish want. I must save this colleague of mine. That's not selfish. I have to do this. If I don't do this, then something terrible could happen to him. We've seen what they're capable of. I've seen them do this to my Padawan. They're now doing it to an incredibly powerful Jedi Master. What do? Okay, I'm going to make this decision. But she doesn't know what the consequences of that decision will be. The same way that Saul doesn't know what his actions will mean for Osha's future. Torben doesn't really put together, but he's so young that the consequences of his actions are going to lead to all of this falling apart. And Dara had, even though he was just listening to Saul, who told him to go in and climb the walls. And here we go. Here's what I've been saying from the beginning. Coral is actually the ultimate master here and the one behind it all. Coral says she would die before she let the Jedi take her children. Then the Jedi take Osha. So is it okay to assume she's dead? Because this episode definitely suggests she survived. Yeah, no body, no death. That's what they'll say about this one. Considering the angry, powerful, force-sensitive witch might be out there. And we also have this unexplained, powerful dark side force user out there as well. Is it possible that Coral and Chimera know each other? Oh, I can answer that. They do not know each other, but what I will say as a tease, if we are able to explore the story more, her species will tell you a little bit more about where she ends up. Well, if this were the old times, I'd say she was an Iridonian and that she's going to end up on Iridonia, but they retcon that, so she's going to end up on Dathomir with the Night Sisters and blah, blah, blah. That's where Darth Maul ends up being. I don't fucking know. We know Anastasia is right when she says someday these noble intentions you have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy, but how does she know that? I think she's seeing the way the Jedi are reacting to her children. She's just extrapolating. When May asks for help, this is the big one. When she turns into the smoke monster, what was it? When May asks for help, Anastasia not only starts dematerializing her own body, she makes May turn into a shadow as well. What can you tell us about that? StarWars.com says that she was enveloping her in a maternal embrace of protection. Not what Headland says. Headland basically says that she was trying to escape with her. Anastasia's main concern is that violence will be used. So that she was, her main concern is the safety of her children. That's the why. It's an honor, Jesus Christ. What she's doing is what Jecki says in episode 4, that it's an honor to see anyone transform into the Force. I believe that Anastasia is transforming herself and May into the Force in a way that doesn't kill them. And of course, we saw Coral turn into a smoke monster and disappear. Yeah. Saul confuses May for Osha during the standoff right before he kills Anastasia. What does that mix up reveal about Saul in that moment? He's racist. That he doesn't know her as well as he thinks he does. Chimera has a similar reaction to Osha that Saul has. Saul has the Qui-Gon Anakin connection with her. This is a powerful, force-sensitive child. This child is meant to be my pet. And he feels the same way. Right, which is sort of what I said, that he would have felt the same way about her. The second Osha walks into the apothecary, he knows that it's not her, but he can still feel that something is different. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. And again, just more about how horrible their Jedi are, and that's what she wanted to do from the beginning. Torben, all of them. Again, the Jedi did nothing wrong. Episode 7 gives us a totally different perspective. We saw episode 3 when May tells Osha, I'll kill you. Did that actually happen, or is Osha misremembering that? We talked about this a lot in the writer's room. There was a healthy discussion about, do you utilize this kind of language as a child? And I said, I think so. Yeah. Remember when I was little, I have 2 sisters. I have a younger brother. We said insane things to each other. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Will we learn whether Chimera is truly a Sith or not in the season finale? What I will say is you don't hear it from his mouth, but there are a couple of small things that happen that intimate the answer to your question. So no, it's still up in the air. And the whole Knights of the Ren thing, she thought that was really great. But here's the big one. And this is the Nerdist himself as we close out this almost 20-minute video. Let me know if you watched the whole thing and you now have the wasting disease like I do. Will Darth Plagueis show up? And will there be a connection? Headland says, yes. I do have a plan for it to connect. If I continue to get to tell this story, I know how I would like that to play out. And I would say I think it's pretty complicated and messy. And does that surprise you? Because this show to begin with has been complicated and messy. Holy God.
Yes, yes.
Let me know what you think about this one. Did it answer some questions? Magic's a thing now. It's a fully thing. It's not just the Force used in a different way. It's magic. I don't know how it works. I don't know how you counter it. No one does now. It's whatever Dave Filoni, Pablo Hidalgo, and Leslye Headland decide. Anyway, let me know what you think of this one. Make sure to like, share, and sub. Oh, if you've done that, thank you. If you're going to do that, thank you. Oh.
Well. Bye.